Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and today's topic is Tartaria and underground Sacramento. I'm going to be sharing some really interesting photos that were sent to me by Francine, so thank you so much, Francine, for these. And it just shows you what a beautiful city Sacramento is, but it's got a bit of a fishy historical background, and we're going to look into that too. So let's get started. As with many old towns in the United States, the buildings have a very Tartarian look to them. You can see the red brick, you can see the arched windows, and it's an architecture style that is seen all over the world, and many people have associated it with Tartaria. Now, I haven't really looked into if there's actually a link with the actual empire of Tartaria and this architecture, but it's become a catch-all term for this type of architecture. And so to me, it does say that there was a civilization that was worldwide, because there are so many similarities in the building style, in the art, in much of the illustrations that you will find on the old style literature. So something's going on for sure. And it's very interesting to see this in Sacramento because, as we'll look into in a little bit, this Sacramento, I believe, was first founded in 1848. And unbeknownst to me, Sacramento does have an underground, just like Seattle does. And I've done a few videos on the undergrounds that are in certain places around the United States. Even my own little town doesn't have what would be called an underground, but there are underground tunnels here. So that always fascinates me. And so what you can see here is certainly we still have the red brick going on, and we have the arches. And this was once the original first floor, we'll say, of this town. And we hear similar stories around the country that it was raised a level. And there are a lot of very, um, we'll say, fishy. I'm just going to say that again, fishy stories about how and why it was raised. But there it is. And we'll get into the story that we're told about the underground in Sacramento in just a bit. But for now, I just wanted to share some more of these photographs with you. We have some more photos of these beautiful architecture here. Just, it really seems like a very lovely place to visit. At first glance, even though I'm over in Pennsylvania and this is in Sacramento, California, these are the sorts of buildings that are even in my little town. So you could easily mistake that with something that you would see just a couple of blocks from my house. In addition, you also see lots of this going on in my town as well. And some of them, in fact, in where I live, the sidewalks go right up to the window, and some of them in fact still have glass in them, so the glass is right at, I mean, it's connected with the sidewalk where I live, and I'm sure that they've got similar things here too. And we've got more of these what we'll call mud flood windows, but again, you know, the story goes that I don't know if it was just some of the buildings in Sacramento or the entire city, but they claim that it was raised a level. Some more of these buildings, very similar to buildings again where I live too. This one here really caught my eye because to the normal passerby, this would just look like a dilapidated building that maybe, you know, was remodeled on this side. But I'm wondering, it looks, you can see right underneath this, what I'm guessing is concrete, the original red brick. So I don't know, this was probably re-bricked over here. I'm not sure, but here you can certainly see that you can see some of the old brick peeking out. Additionally, you see these really intricate columns that I'm surprised are still standing because they are very, very old looking. They're kind of worn down, and I don't know if they are relics from the past or if they are what some people would call follies, which are replicas of older columns, architectural styles, bridges, things like that. So if you live in the area, let me know what they say about these. So in this area here, we also can easily see this original red brick was covered up. And I always wonder, why would they cover up this beautiful brick with really a lot of times here it's concrete. I'm sure there was something on top of the concrete at one point, but a lot of times you'll find aluminum siding on these buildings. And I just don't understand why, because the brick is absolutely beautiful. And here again, we can see some of the older brick peeking out here. And again, I'm not sure if this is some of the older brick or if this was rebricked. And here we have a close-up on one of these columns. And yeah, just beautiful. Imagine what it looked like when it was new, still in its heyday, so to speak. Some more of these, what we would call mud flood windows. And right here we have a placard for the Lady Adams building, which is right here. And it says, built in 1852 by the Lady Adams Mercantile Company, named after the brigadier which brought the partners around the Horn. She has survived fires, flood, and being lifted one story. So right there in one sentence, you have all of these strange stories that keep showing up on Wikipedia over and over again. You know, we've got the fire, we have the flood, we have being lifted one story. So, and again, we always have around the same period of time. This was built in 1852. She has served merchants, bankers, and as a rooming house, and has been flat busted more than once, the only survivor of the fire of November 1852. She was named California Historical Landmark number 603 on May 22nd, 1957, before we got around to it. She was the only survivor of the fire. So the entire city, oh, so we have, apparently it seems like we have a great fire of Sacramento where everything except this building was burned. Well, isn't that interesting? And here we just have a nice view of the sides of the side of this building with the original red brick, what I'm calling original red brick. It seems to me that it is. It says Mechanics Exchange, and then over here we have another building with what we call the mud flood windows. And the funny thing is that even though they claim that the city was raised, you see these sorts of windows everywhere. And not every city has a story of being raised. So that's what makes me wonder about it. Because if you see something that is exactly the same and one city says that the whole city was raised, don't you think that that's how it would happen in the other cities too? And if it happened in the other cities, you would think that would be a big deal, at least to show up in their history. Here we have some homeopathic remedies here on display. I'm guessing this is at the museum, but we've got for headache, dyspepsia, I'm guessing nausea, vomiting, earache, whooping cough, disorders of the heart. I think that says pimples. I'm not sure. Lots of them for dyspepsia. I don't even know what that is. Neuralgia, maybe fever blister, common cold, spasms, and convulsions. Much of it is probably more effective than our pharmaceuticals. I'm guessing this is another display, and it's funny. It's the squatter riots in Sacramento City. I'm like, oh, squatters were an issue then too, huh? Now here it says, after the streets had been raised, many businesses opted to use their new basements as alternate entrances. Patrons entered via the original sidewalks, which were now underground. Skylights like this were built into the new plank sidewalks to provide some lights for those who chose to use the hollow sidewalks. And to me, this just screams civilization built on top of another civilization, because I'm sorry, but for the life of me, I cannot see how it would work to raise buildings up off of the ground and for their foundations to not have been completely damaged in the process. Another display here that says hollow sidewalks and the city below. This system has its advantages. It makes the floors shady, very shady, and this is a great thing in the warm climate. Mark Twain, 1866. Well, yes, I think the whole thing is shady, very shady. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be able to read down here, but it does say today hollow sidewalks and other remnants of the past remind us of the struggle for balance between the force of nature and the power of man. And I really can't see what the rest of it says. There was probably a reflection. A city on stilts. So yes, so this is another narrative that they use stilts to raise these buildings. And I actually I'll link to the video that I made a couple years ago about a city being raised. I forget what city it was. It shows you where my brain is at. It's not here with me today. Anyway, a city on stilts. Less enterprising men would have left the beautiful ruin of a city to molder away and decay, but the Sacramentans could not be induced to forego the work of a decade just for the disasters of a month. Between 1861 and 1873, jacks lifted hundreds of buildings, streets, and sidewalks as much as 18 feet above the known high water mark. 18 feet! These buildings were supposedly lifted by jacks in the 19th century by 18 feet. And I mean, look at this building. This was raised by jacks. This decade-long construction project was dangerous, controversial, and expensive. I guess so. In the end, however, it proved successful. Well, that's what they say. The other video that I made, it even spoke of how while these buildings were being raised in the other city, it said that even shoppers would still be coming and going in the process. And it's like, what? How does that even happen? And why is no one questioning this? Here it says, property owners were responsible for constructing their own retaining walls and sidewalks once their block had been selected for raising. Anticipating decreased business activity during construction, you'd think no business activity. Many businesses chose to shut down entirely or move. So again, I think that this is just an entire narrative to cover up that there was a city built on top of a city, and to also just kind of explain away the fact that a lot of these buildings seem to have been partially buried. So this photo really got my attention because it shows here that in 1857, this city was almost entirely built out. Look at all of these buildings here in 1857. And if you look at the buildings, they're beautiful. They're not shacks, that's for sure. They're the buildings that we were just looking at. And yet somehow in 1857, they were able to build all of this. So this is what made me think, oh, well, that's interesting. Well, let me find out, when did Sacramento even come about? So good old Wikipedia. History of Sacramento, California. The history of Sacramento, California began with its founding by Samuel Brennan and John Augustus Sutter Jr. in 1848 around an embarcadero that his father, John Sutter Sr., constructed at the confluence of the American and Sacramento rivers a few years prior. So the history started in 1848, and by 1857 it looked like this. Okay, sure. Let's keep reading. Before the arrival of Europeans, the Nisenan Native American tribe inhabited the Sacramento Valley area. So were those buildings there when they were there? That's my question. The Spanish were the first Europeans to explore the area, and Sacramento fell into the Alta California province of New Spain when the conquistadors claimed Central America and the American Southwest for the Spanish Empire. The area was deemed unfit for colonization by a number of explorers, and as a result remained relatively untouched by the Europeans who claimed the region, excepting early 19th century coastal settlements north of San Francisco Bay. Okay, let me just stop right there. So if the area was deemed unfit for colonization, to me, what they're trying to say is that this was not already there. So somehow in 9 years' time, this was built out? Sure. So here it says the California gold rush started when gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill, one of Sutter Sr.'s assets in the city of Coloma in 1848. The arrival of prospectors in droves. So prospectors built those beautiful buildings? I don't know, ruined Sutter's new Helvetia, and trade began to develop around a wharf he had established where the American and Sacramento rivers joined. In the region where Sutter had planned to establish the city of Sutterville, Sacramento City was founded. Sutter Sr. put his son in charge in frustration, and Sutter Jr. worked to organize the city in its growth. Well, he did an excellent job if all that actually happened. However, its location caused the city to periodically fill with water. Oh, so there were issues, but still, it was able to look like this in 1857. Okay. Fires would also sweep through the city. Oh, okay. To resolve the problems, the city worked to raise the sidewalks and buildings and began to replace wooden structures with more resilient materials like brick and stone. That sounds awfully familiar to the narrative of the Seattle Underground, doesn't it? The city was selected as the state capital in 1854 after Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo failed to convince the state government to remain in the city of his namesake. Let's take a look at Seattle Underground very quickly. And like I said, I did do another video on the Seattle Underground. You can find all of these in my Question the Narrative playlist. And I will try to link as many as I can think of at the end of this video. But let's just read through this. Seattle Underground. The Seattle Underground is a network of underground passageways and basements in the Pioneer Square neighborhood of Seattle, Washington. They were located at ground level when the city was built in the mid-19th century. So again, same narrative. They started out at ground level, mid-19th century, but fell into disuse after the streets were elevated. Oh, the streets were elevated here too. Well, let's see, why were they elevated? At approximately 2:20 p.m. on June 6, 1889, an accidentally overturned glue pot in a carpentry shop started the most destructive fire in the history of Seattle. After this Great Seattle Fire, new construction was required to be of masonry, and the town streets were regraded 1 to 2 stories higher. So, after a fire, oh, and I also see, and often flooded, Pioneer Square had originally been built mostly on filled-in tidelands and often flooded. So they're both flooded, they both have fires, they're both raised a level, and they have to start using masonry rather than the wood that they were built with before. Okay, that's the funny thing is that you look at the pictures of the Seattle Underground and it was masonry in those buildings as well. So that try to explain that. Back to the Sacramento article, I'm just going to read a little bit of this part here. It says, now this is prior to Sutter's arrival through 1838. Indigenous people such as the Miwok and Mayadu Indians were the original inhabitants of the North Californian Central Valley. So this is through 1838. Of the Mayadu, the Nisenan Mayadu group were the principal inhabitants of pre-Columbian Sacramento. The peoples of this tribe were hunter-gatherers, relying on foraged nuts and berries and fish from local rivers instead of food generated by agricultural means. So basically what they're trying to say is there's no way that those people built those buildings. They definitely were not there at that time. Okay, so I just came down to the years 1850 to 1860. In January 1850, a major flood, another flood, devastated the city. January of 1850, a major flood devastated the city. But in 1857, it looked like this. Okay. Rain from heavy storms had saturated the grounds upon which Sacramento was built, and the American and Sacramento rivers crested simultaneously. The economic impact was significant because merchandise stationed at the Embarcadero was not secured and washed away in the flood. Sacramento rallied behind Hardin Bigelow, who led efforts to implement emergency measures to protect the city from another disaster of that nature. Responsibility for construction of protective levees and dams won him support, and he was elected the first mayor of the city. A second major flood in March of 1850 was averted by Bigelow's efforts. Kind of sounds like San Francisco. Didn't it have two earthquakes in a very short amount of time, too, supposedly? Anyway, in April of the same year, the city experienced its first major fire. Oh, that's when it all started. A second fire, oh, we've got another one, in November destroyed a number of commercial establishments in the city. In response to growing fear of a potential catastrophe, citizen volunteers founded California's first fire protection organization. Okay, then we've got cholera that happened. And then 2 years after the cholera epidemic, well, what do we see here? However, the city caught a fire. Again, the night of November 2nd, 1852, nearly 85% of the city was destroyed. What were they hiding? In the fire. Sacramentans rebuilt the city with brick rather than the fire hazardous wood that was the medium for buildings in that era. And as we can see, that is a narrative you will hear over and over and over and over again. A second fire in 1854 destroyed 12 newly reconstructed downtown city blocks, including the city courthouse. And I'm going to show you again because I'm trying to make a point. Fire in 1852, 85% of the city destroyed. Another fire in 1854 that destroyed 12 city blocks. But by 1857, bam, there we go. Sure. So I hope that I've made my point that the history of Sacramento that we're given, at least through Wikipedia, is suspicious at best. So here, this is another display. This is from 1887. This is the Capitol building. And I'll leave a link to that Wikipedia article in the description box. I always leave all of those articles in the description box. There's some really cool maps on display here. This one actually says British America. I wish I could find a year for this map because as you can see over here, it says unexplored country. So at this point in time, California was considered to be unexplored. Here is a map of California. And what caught my eye right away on this one was where it says pyramid here. So I decided to look up what that is. Now, there is a pyramid dam, but that is farther south in California. And I believe the pyramid that this is referring to is the one in Nevada, which is Pyramid Lake. And Francine also sent me some pictures of Pyramid Lake, so I will share that in a future video. That is also another interesting place. And here I'm just going to show you some more of these maps. They're beautiful. Like, imagine if they would still make maps like this. They're just works of art in and of themselves. Just the detail in them. And to be able to even look and see how much detail they put inside of the maps themselves. I love to find the maps that have, where it shows fortresses. Sometimes you can see star forts in some of the maps. It's just amazing compared to the maps that we get nowadays. Here's another section. This whole area down here at this point was Florida. This is Canada right here, according to this. And much of the Northwest seems to be unmapped at this point. And I find it interesting here to see that, so the United States is over here, and then right here is Africa, even kind of a little bit north, almost in the same latitude as what we would consider to be Canada. So that's interesting. And here's when we run into the artifacts at the Museum of Tartaria. So does that establish a link with the architecture of the city? I think it's a possibility. So right here it says Tartare. And oh, see here it says Chinese, Persian. So it's not even just Tartaria. We've got Tartar. I can't see what that says there. Um, Armenian maybe here. A Laplander, a Turk, um, say Grecian. I'm not sure what that one says. Hungarian, I think this one is. One of the Tartar again. The San Francisco Illustrated Wasp. What's this? The Sacramento River in the future. Oh, were they saying it was going to dry up? That they were going to have to pull the boats around with wheels on? Looks that way. Wow. The life of Saint Andrew after the feasts of our Lord Jesu Christ, to for set in order following the legends of the saints and first of Saint Andrew. That's in Old English, obviously. Very interesting. And here is written, this is from the Gospels. It came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. I think that is, yeah. I'd love to have a map like that on my wall. And even regarding the map here, what do you see here? Well, we've got Tartaria right here on this map. So, yeah, Tartaria existed despite the fact that American schools at least don't teach anything about it. I know that some European schools do, at least in Eastern Europe. But over here in America, never heard a single thing about Tartaria. And you would think that we would have, considering the amount of uh, territories that Tartaria seem to possess and the amount of influence. But, maybe that's why they're covering something up, because that's basically what these governments do is they cover things up, they hide things, they make up their own stories. So here we are now back to the underground Sacramento. And it says, as you gaze down, you look back in time at Sacramento's original level. The building that once stood here was probably raised in the 1860s, creating this courtyard and providing access to hollow sidewalk segments. Imagine how easily floodwaters overcame Sacramento when it existed at the courtyard's elevation. Is it any wonder Sacramentans fought back by hoisting streets and buildings on average 10 feet above their original elevations? To the average person reading that, they just think, oh, wow, that is so cool. But to those of us who tend to be a bit more independently thinking, you have to wonder, how in the world could they possibly have done that with the equipment that we're told that they had? How safe was that? How did they do it on such a grand level? How could they have done it in so many cities? Why is it that what seems to be evidence of raised levels in other towns there is no raised level story to it? To me, what it's saying is that many of these cities adopted the same narrative, and they're just trying to explain away why they have these old structures with half buried buildings, why they have underground levels. This is one look. We've got the Tartarian arch, the red brick. This is underground of Sacramento. Here's another one. I mean, you can take tours of it. So it's not like it's hidden. There's tours. It's just that you can't really believe what they say about how it got to be there in the first place. So here we have it says old Sacramento tours descend to history underground. And there we go. And again, you've got the brick, you've got the Tartarian arches. I would love to actually visit one of these places at some point. Okay, so this is actually the entrance to the museum. Francine, the one who sent the photos, she did have a photo of it there. I don't think that I showed it. I think it was much nicer than that one. Yes, see, this one is much nicer than the one that I just shared. So this, yeah, I believe is the entrance to the museum of all of the things that I was just showing you. But anyway, if anything, this walk through Sacramento today, thanks to Francine, it helped us to see once again that they just seem to copy and paste the same story. They have the same outline for these different historical narratives, and they might change little things here and there. They change names, maybe they'll change the years by a little bit, but they're just copying and pasting the history, just slapping it onto different cities and giving it a little bit of a spin. And they're assuming that most people won't notice, and they're right. Most people haven't noticed, but finally, people are noticing. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my YouTube membership, I will leave a link in the description box, or you can just click on it on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.